Welcome to another edition of David Bryant Reports. I am David Bryant. Well, Memorial Day is just ahead of us. A special time to celebrate those who have given their lives for the sake of our country in some of our past battles and wars. It's a time to lay flowers on the graves of those soldiers who put in flags. It's a time to come together as a community to remember what has been done on our behalf. I don't know how you celebrate Memorial Day in the community where you live. Where I live, a smaller community as part of Metro New York City. For years, we've always begun with a Memorial Day parade that, has all the scouting troops involved, the high school band, lots of fire trucks and police cars with their sirens blaring and people lining the streets. It's a lot of fun. But then we all gather in Memorial Park, and then it's a pretty solemn hour as we think about those who have died for us, as we celebrate them, honor them. I mean, there are times not only that we have, talks from the mayor, but there are actually times of prayer, at least in our community. Memorial Day actually began in 1868. It was called Decoration Day. That's when it supposedly officially began, though there are those who believe the first Memorial Day was initiated by Abraham Lincoln in his Gettysburg Address. That whole event took place to memorialize and honor those who had fought and died. The battlefield of Gettysburg and were actually still buried there. And it was Abraham Lincoln who said we need to take, another sense of devotion to the task to which they gave their full measure of devotion. He said we need to commit ourselves to becoming a more perfect union where we have government of the people, by the people, for the people. Abraham Lincoln was sort of memorializing those who had died, but he was also looking at the present and saying, here's who we must become, and then looking ahead, and here's what our goal is ultimately to be because of who we are. A government of the people, by the people, for the people, that we somehow find that more perfect union. I got to thinking, in a sense, that is what Memorial Day really is, isn't it? We look at the past, at those who've sacrificed and what they've done for us and honor that. We look at the present, which their sacrifices made possible. So we celebrate what it means to be an American. But we also look ahead. Why? Because Memorial Day also serves as the unofficial first day of summer. So in our Memorial Day celebrations, we're actually also looking ahead to a number of months of fun in the sun. It's all a part of this celebration. Tombstones are sort of memorials, aren't they? And every day that tombstone is standing there is for the person who's buried there a Memorial Day. What's really interesting for me is that I became a Christian in a cemetery as a freshman in college, trying to work out the call of the gospel, decide if I was going to give my life to Jesus. And one day in late November, sitting on a tombstone in a cemetery, I committed my life to Christ. And what was really cool is a few years later with young children, I was able to go back to that cemetery and take them to the very tombstone where I surrendered to Jesus. And that tombstone, it marks a memorial that has been going on ever since. Every day for me since then has been Memorial Day, because every day I keep remembering all that Jesus has done for me in his incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection, ascension, that makes possible who I am today, makes possible that I can live in utter and total forgiveness and reconciliation to God, live in the fullness and power of the Holy Spirit, who's transforming me into the image of Christ and leading me into the mission of Christ, but also celebrate all that is to come, all the promises of God that stretch out before me. I think about Joshua in Joshua chapter 4, after the Israelites came through the Jordan River that had parted, even though it was in its flood stage, sort of a reenactment of the Red Sea. And the whole 1 million people of Israel came through that river on dry ground. And before the river came back together again, Joshua ordered 12 men to go in and get 12 huge boulders to build this monument on the other side of the Jordan, each stone representing one of the tribes of Israel. And it was for the purpose, he said, so the future generations who came upon those stones would be moved to ask, what do these stones mean? What does this memorial here mean? And then we can tell them what God did for us, how he brought us out of slavery, how he made us into a nation, how he brought us through all the things that could have defeated us and took us into the land of promise. Those stones are a remembrance of the past, the present, and the future in God's redemptive work with Israel. And so it is with our very lives. We have been built on a foundation, which is Christ. We are like memorial stones ourselves. You remember Paul said in 2 Corinthians 2, he said, these are his words, remember Jesus Christ, risen from the dead, a descendant of David. He wraps it all together. He says you need to keep every day a memorial day. You need to remember Jesus Christ, all that he's done for you, all that he's doing for you. He's defeated death. He now is the living Messiah and Christ and Lord of your lives and descendant of David. He is the one that's going to take you into all the promises to come because he is now the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Remember him. Make that a way of life. And Paul goes on to say in the next verse that that's why he was suffering. Everything he was willing to suffer, because every day he had a memorial day and was so focused on Jesus, past, present, future, that he was willing to even give his life. But then he turns around at the end of that paragraph and he says to Timothy, cause the people you're pastoring to keep on remembering. You know, when Jesus came to the church in Ephesus, there in Revelation chapter 2, he said, I have this against you. You've left me as your supreme love. Remember from which you have fallen. In other words, go back to where it was at the beginning. Memorialize the relationship we had at the beginning, where I was your supreme love. That's your only hope. Brothers and sisters, we desperately need in the church right now a Christ awakening. That's what this nation needs. It is its only hope. And if you were to say to me, what does that mean? That means the Spirit of God getting us back to the Son of God, making him our first and passionate and supreme love, so that we begin to live in the reality of the past, the present, and the future, so that every day becomes Memorial Day. Because that's going to be true for all the ages to come when we're around the throne saying, worthy is the Lamb. Every day will be Memorial Day, and it needs to start now. Well, that's my report for today. Thank you for joining me. Look forward to being with you next time when we look at the events around us through what I call King Jesus glasses. I'll look forward to seeing you then.